Good evening, everybody. Happy Sunday. It's been a rather more relaxed weekend than I've been accustomed to. Only two confirmations this weekend, um, and then a special event in the northern part of our diocese this morning. So maybe I've got a little more energy and a little more energy to just ruminate on the ways that advertisers, the ways that marketers like to try and separate us from our money. Now, the first way that we can notice that people who are in advertising, people who are in marketing, try to separate us from our money is by stimulating the passions. And I've had a very direct experience of this. It's a very memorable experience. This was when I was in seminary. And, it was a Saturday evening. I had completed all of the homework that I had intended to get done that day. Um, I had gone to supper at the cafeteria. It wasn't very good that night. Usually on the weekends, the cafeteria didn't have all that great of a supper. And we were sitting down and we were watching a football game, me and some of the other guys. During the advertisements, we saw a commercial for Crunchwrap sliders at Taco Bell. And I was hungry. And as it turns out, just about everybody else was hungry too. And we saw those Crunchwrap sliders. They were like a buck a piece because it's Taco Bell. And they're going to feed you an outrageous amount of food for not a lot of money. So during halftime, we all piled into my car and we got to the local Taco Bell and we filled up on Crunchwrap sliders. Now, how did they do it? Well, they just showed us the food and said, "Hey, aren't you hungry?" And it was like, "Yeah, actually, we are." And so at least that particular franchise or that particular branch of Taco Bell in St. Paul ended up making a little bit of money off of that advertisement. They just had to flash the Crunchwrap sliders across the stream so we could see it, and it made us hungry, and we went out and bought it. This is the most straightforward, predictable marketing ploy you could possibly imagine. And as it turns out, college-aged men are pretty susceptible to ads from Taco Bell. So that's one way that advertisers separate you from your money is via stimulating the passions. And once you just notice it, it's real easy to see. Oh, look, there's a burger. Oh, look, there's an attractive woman eating the burger. That's how she stays skinny, is by eating greasy burgers at McDonald's, right? Oh, yeah, makes total sense. Dove ice cream bars. And then it went to the store. Yeah. Sometimes it works. There's a reason it makes money. So stimulating the appetites. That's one way that we can be separated from our money by advertisers. Second way is by kind of fudging things a little bit. So, you're watching YouTube videos about building computers, as you all do, because that's what I do. And you see the latest announcement for an NVIDIA graphics card. They've announced the 4070 Ti Super, wow, and they just want to tell you how great their graphics card is. And so they provide frame rate for you, right? How quickly can this game render Cyberpunk 2077 with path tracing on? How quickly can it render Alan Wake 2 or all of these other graphically demanding games? And then they give you some numbers. It's like, oh, wow, you get 90 frames a second with that. That's a lot of frames. Now, I'm not going to say that NVIDIA would be lying about that. The truth in advertising laws that we have in this country makes downright lying about these things a little bit difficult. But, I can imagine them, let's say, running a benchmark 20 times and finding the number that they're looking for in one of those benchmarks. And then they're going to pick that number. And that number is going to be what they represent as being the speed of their new graphics card. It's not really lying, but it is a little bit deceptive. And if you just take them at their word for it, you'll be rather more ignorant than you could be. If you're going to be a smart, responsible shopper, especially with the price of graphics cards these days, you need to do a little bit of your own research first, get some independent benchmarks and testers, because there's lots of nerds who love doing that, give you a more average and representative score. So, advertisers will try and stimulate your passions, or they will try to get you to be ignorant about something. A little bit of enforced ignorance about the real quality of their product. Now, the third way that advertisers might do this, I won't say this is all advertising, but they might just try and induce you into wanting something that you really shouldn't want. So I recall being a lad, and we had cable television, and I would see on the cable box that Star Trek Next Generation would be on it too. And be a genuine Star Trek enjoyer, I wanted in on some of that action. And the channel that would have Star Trek Next Generation on at 2 p.m. was Spike TV. You know, that's the channel that makes you feel proud to be a man. And I was a middle school boy, and couldn't help but notice the Axe body spray commercials and the effects that supposedly had on young ladies, making them in a somewhat frenzied state. And so what Axe was really trying to do me to do was to want something that I shouldn't want to be so irresistibly attractive to women that they would chase after me and tackle me. Now, as anybody who's ever been in a middle school boys' locker room knows, that's not actually how Axe works. Really doesn't. Maybe it smells better than BO, but it's not really all that good. So we see these three tactics that the advertisers have to separate you from your money. They will stimulate your passions. They'll try and keep you a little bit ignorant as to the real quality of their product. And perhaps they will get you to want something that you really shouldn't want, something that's actually not good for you. Reading the Summa a little bit before the live stream, I was trying to figure out how to talk about this, and I noticed that there were 3 causes for sin listed by St. Thomas Aquinas, 3 ways that you can get into sin. And that's by being deceived by one of your appetites, by ignorance, or by malice. Those 3 ways are the ways that the evil one tries to tempt us to get our attention off from the Lord and fall into sin. Ignorance, sensual appetites, and malice, wanting things that are not good or good for us. Which leads me to conclude that the very first act of marketing was the serpent tempting Eve in the Garden of Eden. With the sensual appetites, the promise of knowledge, and the inclusion of disobedience to divine commands, which makes the devil the world's first marketing director. So keep your eyes open out there, kids, and let's go ahead and publish that StreamYard link. And let me know what you think. Was the devil really the world's first marketing director or not? Let's see. Yes, Laura was talking about having First Communion at her parish today and seeing the white dresses. And Dawn was talking about how some people don't have many occasions to dress up for it, which, there's an easy way to solve that is just to dress more nicely every day. Put on a nice shirt, put on a nice pair of slacks, nice dress shoes. Mark apparently used to do that. Anyway.
I did.
Yeah.
Catholic junior high.
Mm-hmm.
And freshman year of high school.
Yeah. 17th century noblemen had the best dresses, apparently. I don't know. I wasn't around in the 17th century.
Yeah, I wasn't there either. Weird.
Yep. And Sandy came home from work early today, so glad you're here. And Dawn talked about how the Dove ice cream bars did that. So yeah, the world's oldest occupation is in fact false advertising, and not the other thing that people talk about.
That sounds right, actually.
Yeah,
I don't
and
know.
had
Yeah.
crinoline with a California 1865 vibe. That must be some kind of girl thing. I don't understand any of that.
Sounds like a girl word, not a guy word.
Crinoline. Crinoline?
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 Sounds like something you cook with. I don't know.
Okay. Not a California 1865, a circa.
Circa.
Okay. Sorry. I thought it was a gold rush thing.
Sounded like a gold rush thing to me. So.
Oh, there you go. Why didn't you just say that?
I know, really. Some people are, too knowledgeable about the thing, and then they can't communicate anymore.
That's actually deadly for preaching.
Yeah.
Apparently, Francisco Suarez, 16th century Jesuit, was a miserable preacher, even though he was like the top philosopher. You wouldn't like him, but he was granted the chair of philosophy at a university. His political philosophy wasn't bad, but his speculations on the nature of being. I don't know. I don't have a one-word thing to call that anymore, Mark. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. Religion. I call it religion. I think that's
religion.
The correct term.
Okay. Well, then he was way off because he was a nominalist.
No one's an actual nominalist. That just cracks me up. But yeah.
Well, he was trying.
Nominalists are very trying. That's true. I don't know. Did I share with you my little thesis on marketing and the rise of marketing?
I don't think I've heard this one yet. This is a brand new rant for our Sunday nights.
Oh, this is new stuff. It's still hot off the brain here, and I'm thinking about it like for 2 months or something, and that's about it. Like maybe a little bit longer, but not even a year. Everything else I think of for many years. This time I'm going to get brave. I think the rise of marketing is related to people doing things outside of church, because in the old days, all the communication went through the church, like all of it, right? Like if you needed to know who was selling things, right, and how much you could get for things and stuff like that, like it kind of went through the church, right? That's where all the advertising happened.
It certainly would have been in the shadow of the church, right? You could imagine a medieval village. You had the town square with the church there. That's where the market would have been set up. That's where you would have gone to have gotten information. So, I mean, we shouldn't have a overly strict meaning of what you say by, in the church, as if it was literally in the church building while Father was trying to preach.
No, not while he was trying to preach, but actually almost certainly. I mean, Luther didn't nail stuff up on the door for no reason. That was what you did.
Yeah,
right? Yeah. Like the communications hub of the village was the church, the building, maybe inside, maybe outside, maybe in the shadows of, sure, whatever. But I think that makes a difference, right? Because when you're communicating that way, there's a certain degree of reverence and sacredness that you have. So there's certain things that aren't going to get communicated, right? Ever, right? And there's certain ways that you will communicate everything else. I mean, if you want to go with medium as the message sort of thing, it's a garbage frame, but whatever, it's close enough. You can do that. But now we've lost that, right? And we have no way to communicate. We don't have any central hub in the middle of the village anymore, right?
And it's not personal anymore.
Right.
I mean, it is actually getting a little bit personal, but it's impersonally personal.
Well, it's getting personalized.
Personalized, yeah, that's the right word for it.
Because it's not personal anymore.
Because it's just an algorithm that notices, hey, people who like these things tend to like these things. And very simple algorithms. You could program them yourself if you had the gumption.
I got the book right over there.
He's got the book right over there.
Python. Anyone can do it.
Anyone could do it.
Recommender algorithms are easy. No AI necessary.
Yeah,
really easy.
But so it's like it's personalized to you, but in such an insidious, impersonal manner.
Right. It's not personal. It's personalized, which is an affectation of personal, right? It's a simulacra of being personal. That's why it's personal. The language betrays everything perfectly in this case, in most cases, actually. And because we're not communicating through church anymore, the profane is kind of okay. All this, I mean, some of the advertising now, I'm just like, oh,
that goes beyond profane. We would call it sordid in canon law. Profane just means ordinary use, so we can sell a church for profane but not sordid use if with the right permissions.
Okay. I didn't realize. I've never heard that distinction before.
Yeah. I mean, so it's one of those words that's kind of drifted, because words drift all the time. They don't get nailed down. So it does tend to mean like, kind of crass and unseemly. But in the church's canon law, it just means everyday, not sacred.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I got to push back on Sandy. No, the reason why he used the church door was because it was already the bulletin board. He didn't invent anything.
See, he invented letters to the editor, basically. No, he used a lot of pamphlets. I think the pamphlets had a much bigger impact. That's what they're talking about in the rest of history anyway. The pamphlets had a much bigger impact than nailing anything to a door.
Yeah, I think most of what he invented was chaos for no good reason. And he repented, probably, it seems like, for most of it on his deathbed. But also kind of too late, dude. Don't do that.
Yeah. I don't know, man. It was like, I always think of the Fifth Lateran Council, like not doing anything. Like they brought all the bishops together. The Pope called an ecumenical council. They brought in the best preacher who just, like, for the opening session, laid out, hey guys, here's all the problems and we need to fix it. And everybody was in agreement on fixing it. And then they didn't do anything. So I'm wondering, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and absolve, Martin Luther because he's dead and he's half past absolution. But if it wasn't him, I think it was going to end up being somebody else. He just happened to be that particular lightning rod. And it might not have been when it happened. Maybe it would happen 10 years later. I don't know. Before somebody else would have hit the right concoction of rabble rousing and sophistry. There, I said it, sophistry.
Sophistry, indeed. Lots and lots of sophistry. It's sort of like institutionalized sophistry.
Yeah. So, anyway.
So that's what I think marketing is, because the church is no longer the hub of communications. I'm not blaming any particular event, or for once, I'm not even blaming the church.
Yeah.
Although I've been watching Spencer for Hire. Great show. So great. Set in Boston, of course. Right, based on Robert B. Parker's books. Robert B. Parker's awesome. He also did, there's a whole TV series that was done not too long ago with Sam Selleck as well, based on his books.
Is it fiction or documentary?
Yeah, it's private eye stuff.
Oh.
I have a signed first copy Robert B. Parker somewhere that my mom got me a billion years ago. It was interesting because Spencer for Hire, it's set in Boston, and very Catholic. And I had no idea how Catholic it was till now, because
you didn't grow up in it. Somehow you grew up in Boston, in French, Canadian, and Irish family, and didn't grow up Catholic. It's like,
yeah. Well, I mean, like my mother's mother, Nana, had a stained glass in her house. So
a bunch of statues too.
Glass. Yeah, she was very devout. She was ridiculously devout, actually. Never preached at all.
No, she probably just fed you.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Sacred, Sandy. Sacred is a really interesting word, right? Because it goes back to Latin, sacer, which actually means to cut something, to cut it off. And so for the Latins, when they talked about the sacred, it was anything that was cut off and you weren't supposed to touch it. And so for like the Latin of the poets, and there's one particular famous passage in Virgil that was quoted by Dante. It means those things that are so high above us that we shouldn't touch them. It also means those things below us that we shouldn't touch, right? Those things are cut off. And you got this ordinary level of human society that we are allowed to actually engage with. It's ordinary, it'd be profane, right? We're allowed to just handle it and play around with it, and it's no problem. And so if you want to know where the sacred and the profane are cut off from each other, just look at swear words, those things you aren't allowed to say. The swear words are either, taking something holy and dragging it down to our level, bad, really bad, don't do that, or taking something out of the gutter, out of the sewer, and pulling it up to our level, or something that's we share in common with the animals and pulling that up to our level. So yeah, that sacredness. Now in English, it seems to only refer to those things that are above us. It's kind of lost the below us meaning that it had originally in the Latin. And that's fine, because as we've talked about not 5 minutes ago, words just kind of run away on us sometimes. So sacred, I don't know if that's narrow or broad, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the thing we've lost the sense for, right? When you try to make the world equal, or you try to include all the margin because you can't draw boundaries, then you end up, there's no sacred. Everything's profane. But if everything's profane, then where are the things that aren't profane? And how would you find them? And then if you can't find those, how do you tell good from evil? Well, you kind of can.
Yeah. That's why it's very important to still have sacred things. Or I think another problem that we run into is people begin treating politics as if it's sacred, and it's really complicated. Okay, so I know you'd say politics, it just means voting. What do we call the republic? Those things that we have to hold in common together, self-governance.
Well, I would call that government.
Government, right? Yeah.
And there's many forms of government.
Okay.
Right? Because you have to, in order to have common things, they have to be governed. So government is the art of dealing with the common things.
Right. And because they're common, they draw us together, and they're above us, even though they're not on the level of God. And so when people get stuck on not being able to see past the politics into the eternal, that also causes problems.
Yeah.
Because if they flatten the world out, then that can't work. So we've got to have something above us now. But let's have it be something that we can control. Governance, control. Oh my goodness. It's foolishness, I say. Oh.
Yeah, that's where people get caught up. They try to equalize.
Yeah.
And they flatten everything out, and they need a hierarchy because they can't see and they can't move because they can't judge and discern. And then so they have to put the hierarchy back in order to have contrast, to have sight. And then usually, because it's their perspective and they're the ones that need it, they have to put themselves at the top, usually completely unwittingly. And that happened to me on Twitter the other day. I was just like, no, you liking that tweet tells me everything about your arrogance level, and you don't see it because you're on arrogance.
The more you talk about Twitter, the less I want to be on it.
No, you're not missing anything. Colin Wright has been yapping on about evolution, and I'm asking the very simple, easy questions. He's not getting back to me. Well, too bad. I know Colin too. I know him from Clubhouse, but whatever. I guess when you're in the sciencey thing and somebody says, "Okay, but where does nature come from?" It's like, and you can't answer it because science can't answer such a question. It's within nature, right? All of science is contained within nature, within the material aspect of nature. So not even nature, just the material side of it. And so somebody asks you that question, you're kind of caught, right? You're kind of screwed because you can't answer it scientifically, which is fine. I got accused of, your theory is garbage. It sounds like a mouth fart or something. And I was like, I didn't put forth a theory, dude. I literally asked a question. The question is not a theory. It's not even close to a theory. It doesn't resemble a theory in any way, shape, or form, but I'm glad you're stupid. Also, you're stupid.
You're glad Mark, that's not the right thing. You should wish he was more competent. Because then you'd be in a world with one more competent person.
I don't think it works that way, Father. I really don't.
Okay, all right.
Maybe
it doesn't work that way.
Maybe I should pray that he could be bestowed competence, but
or at least wisdom.
That's the interesting thing. The quiet fool, the silent fool, is the wisest man in the room. And I actually had to pull out this old quote that my mother used to tell me all the time. It's better to remain silent and be thought a fool than to open one's mouth and remove all doubt.
It was Mark Twain riffing on the Bible, I think.
Yeah. My mom used to pull that out all the time. I'm like, okay, fair. It's a good point. Yeah. I like that quote though.
The tricky thing about evolution is, and it's one of those words that, like, I see this a lot with modernity, right? Because it's an ill-defined term, people project whatever they either like or don't like about modernity onto it, and then people end up talking past each other. And evolution does the same thing, because for most people, it functions on the level of a myth.
Right.
It doesn't actually function on the level of science, because science is actually really hard and unnatural for us to do it well.
Well, but it can't. So this is the funny part. It's like there are the things that people talk about in terms of evolution cannot be scientifically validated. It's not possible because the time frame is too long for us to do an experiment. It's that simple. Because and this is the core problem. In fact, it is the scaling problem in evolution. The local change that can happen within a lifetime or within 3 or 4 generations of a fast living creature, that's not the same mechanism as the thing that happens over multiple generations of longer lived creatures through other mechanisms, right? Because there's mutation, for example. Like,
are you saying that I don't operate the same way as a fruit fly?
Right. But you can't, even the mechanism changes, right? Because you can't test the mutation theory. How would you do that? You can find evidence for mutation, through a genetic line, but you can't develop a test to see if that's the case. And the problem is it's mutation, which means sometimes it ain't going to be there. Does that invalidate the observation? I like that's a question. I'm not saying I know. I'm saying like, how many samples of the mutation not being in the gene before the line is broken? And if the line is broken, but say from birth records that it's actually the same line, now what? Do you throw out the birth records and think somebody lied about their hair? This is not solving a problem for you. I think it is, but it's not. And then how would you test if something worked that way on a scale when you don't have any controls? Like, you and I are not going to control the evolution of a creature across multiple generations.
Oh, yeah. You can't fix an independent variable, can you?
No, you can't.
That's a giant problem.
Right. And so most of the interesting things about evolution are just observations that you either believe or not. You believe, and it's not just the observation. You have to believe the observation and the inference. And some of those inferences, I can tell you right off the bat, are wrong. And then because people don't understand, and this is like Jordan Peterson's great point, right? Like, what about sexual selection? You guys talk about natural selection. What about, if nothing else, natural selection, if you lump sexual selection in, it doesn't happen across all creatures. So it must be a different type of selection at some point. Is it with the apes? Is it with us? Is it before that? Is it with the tigers? Like, I don't know. To go back to the birds. I don't and how would you prove that? That's just a guess. It's just a guess. Could be right or wrong, probably irrelevant. See, and this is the problem. This is the distraction. What are you going to do with that information? Let's suppose you get the information let's suppose somebody brings some tablets down from a mountain. What are you going to do with that? Nothing. You're going to do nothing that's going to change your life at all. And it shouldn't alter anything in your life. And, my point is always, look, I will give you that evolution is not even guided by God. Fine. Really don't care. Not necessary. Explain to me where the nature comes from. Just how did the nature come to be? And then we'll be done here. And Colin Wright's problem is he's like, this simulation theory is stupid. And I'm kind of like, the thing is, simulation theory is the purest form of intelligent design. It cracks me up that people don't notice that. No, really, think about it for a few minutes. The purest form of the intelligent design theory. Pure. You're never going to get a better version of it than that. Well, why would that happen with the most sciencey people around? Because you can't get around the problem of where did it all come from? Who cares if there's a process that does a thing towards an end? I can ignore the process and the end. You still have to explain where it came. How did this process come to be? How did the space in which this process operates come to be? How did the things in the space in which this process operates come to be? How did the things that the process operates on come to be operable by the process? Just explain those things and I'll be on my way. In the meantime,
the Christians over here, along with the Jews, are like, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
You're never going to get a simpler answer. It may not be scientifically satisfying, but you're stuck in nature. And basically something has to not be stuck in nature to make the nature. It's not that hard. This is why I'm always puzzled by it.
Now, have you thought about this? Fruit flies must have the most advanced cells with all those generations, way more advanced than human cells. Have you thought about that? They've had more generations than we have.
Right.
They
More
have the most advanced cells imaginable.
Yes, according to some random criteria and within some constraints we don't understand.
No, it's just advanced. Exactly. They had more iterations.
But that's
advancement. Why are you against
part about
progress?
Advanced? Right. Advanced is totally undefined. Hey, Sandy.
Hey. I'm not going to stick around long because I'm very sore and really tired.
Okay. What's on your mind?
Well, I put a couple of notes in the chat when you guys started talking about evolution because it's kind of interesting. And it intrigued me that Mark kept bringing up the word how, because that came up in one of my courses this week, where I was discussing some of the needs around sort of some of the anomalies that we saw in my son and the ones specifically that affected language and communication. And so I was commenting on with the inability to get at what, you could provide the what being of the language being the terms you would use, all the pieces, the details, could give them details. They'd go in. I made a guess they were going in. It looked like they were. And I remember telling the teachers, well, understanding's half the battle. So we're getting that, but no usage. And that was the thing I was bringing up was the only thing I could think of was talk about what is language and how and why does it work. And if you manage to get a hold of those things later, then you'll know what to do with them, But I did make the point in my chat things that, of course, this was back in the 80s when he was born. And so any of the genetic sciences and stuff weren't where they are today. So they gave us some basic info around it. But there was the possibility that there was something environmental that would have triggered it, but we had some similar questions around some stuff with my other son. And so from the bits of genetics testing that they did on us, they said, well, they knew that there was a change to the twist gene, and they could connect the dots to what that, what were they going to connect? What would they put it down together with the cranial synostosis. Whether it affected the autism, the communication, the deafness, the anything else, they couldn't say, but they knew it connected to at least a component of. And from any testing, they gave us kind of a rough guesstimate of percentages on. He'd probably have a 50% chance to pass it on if he had kids, and his brother maybe 20%. But that was a guess. So, like, I tend to be one of those people that says, I've never particularly cared about all the evolution battles in terms of religion and whatnot. But I have seen evidence of the theoretical basis of, oh, look, stuff that goes on changes things, and that's kind of always how I've perceived it. So I was just kind of going, It's kind of interesting because, you always talk about patterns, Mark. So I'm kind of going, I do think evolution exists in terms of that you can see patterns and track patterns of things as they happen throughout. In the short term, like you were talking about, you could see shifts in things. Whether or not we have the ability to look, back genetically through, if it's a bug, if it's a person, if it's a whatever, whether we can look back far enough to trace some of the roots of it, or whether we can look forward far enough to, see the impact of it. I don't think we're there really well yet.
No, but we'll never be there. I mean, this is the problem. And it's not an argument about whether or not you can see things. This is the problem. You don't need science for any of that. I mean, this is somebody posted the other day, but hold on, Cindy. Somebody posted the other day on Twitter. They said, thanks to Einstein's relativity, we have GPS. That's absurd. It's so wrong. It's hysterical. We were using time to navigate the oceans in the 1800s and 1700s and 1600s and 1500s and 1400s. What are you even talking about? In fact, we were using orbiting bodies to do navigation for thousands of years.
I would put that down as
thing you get out of GPS is precision. That's
okay.
It.
So, but wouldn't that wouldn't be so much evolution as
No, but it's the point about patterns in science.
How people think in terms of the word.
Right. But the science people will claim things like, well, genetics. It's like genetics is explanatory of things after the fact. And that can be useful, but you can't change anything with it.
So the way I see these things functioning, there's a gentleman who lives here in Fargo. Got to know him and his family. He grew up in a very secular household. His folks did not take him to church. They did not teach him to believe in God. And he grew up in Southern California. He's gotten his family out of California. And we were just kind of reminiscing about, growing up, high school. We like a lot of the same bands. We like a lot of the same movies and such. And he talked about how when he was, we'll say like a high schooler, maybe early into college, I don't know the exact timeline, he was utterly captivated by space exploration, black holes, different types of stars, all of these sorts of things, right? And, from his teenage perspective, not having been given any of a transcendent perspective, he said he was fascinated by these things because they were the biggest questions around. And he had this hunger in his heart to find answers to the big questions of where we come from. What does it mean to be a human being? All of those sorts of things. And his public schools and his parents were not providing him with the satisfying answers. It wasn't until you started hanging out with a bunch of weirdo Catholics that he started getting satisfying answers to these questions. And then he became Catholic. He met his wife in the church choir, and now they have 3 kids. And he
I thought you were going to say a choir of their own.
Well, when they're older, perhaps, because they met in church choir, and his wife has also got a lovely voice. So I'm sure some of that will get passed on both genetically and environmentally.
Right.
So
yeah.
So that's the it's like I don't care near as much about evolution as I did when I was in high school. You know, it was like a real gripping question to me because I had a lot of materialism baked into me without asking. It wasn't until, you know, I started getting free of that materialistic ways of thinking that all of this life is just a bunch of electrons running around, that those evolution's just like, okay, that's interesting, might be helpful sometimes, but it's a secondary question. The real primary questions about, you know, what does it mean to be a human being? Where did this universe come from and where is it going? Can't be answered by that.
Right.
And that's what Mark and I are railing on about is trying to answer these questions. And so,
well, and even if it does, right, you know, as you mentioned, Sandy, the environmental impact, evolution doesn't explain environmental impact of anything ever. It just doesn't. It might explain what happened as the result of an environmental impact, and maybe that's helpful. I don't, you know, I'm not quite so sure that that's true, but it might be helpful. But like, it doesn't explain the environmental impact because it doesn't explain the environment. It only explains a process. And again, like, you know, it's the banality of the whole thing. You know, science,
No.
science, quote, discovered stuff all the time that everybody knew.
Like, is banality perhaps, like, I asked earlier about sacred, and now, you know, like, evolution's come up, and actually both of those words have come up in this course that I'm taking, so that's interesting. Banal hasn't come up yet, but is banal in the sense that you're discussing it, does that go to where I was asking how wide or narrow the use of sacred could be? And it's the same thing, like, how wide or narrow do we actually use a concept or a word like evolution?
Evolution's a wide net. It's always a wide net, because what
is that, because we don't know other words? Like, are there other words we should be applying? Like, you know, Father Eric talking about, you know, the difference between, was it, oh shoot, I was thinking about it, secular and
sacred,
whether something is profane or, you know, like, I mean, sordid. Yeah. We don't, I feel like it goes back to your advertising thing at the beginning, is we love having catchphrases and we love having representative words that we can apply to just about anything. And then we get stuck in that loop of, yeah, that's not what I meant, but kind of that's the word that I have at hand. Mm-hmm. I'm just kind of curious, is that also an element of what you guys are aiming at?
Yeah, with the evolution especially. Alvin Plantinga made the case that when people say evolution, they actually mean 6 different things.
Yeah.
Which are with a wide variety of implications. So, you know, sometimes when people say evolution, they're implying a worldview that says that the universe is really, really, really old. And that's fine. It's really not that interesting. I don't really care about things that happened before about 1995 because I don't remember them. They're basically just made up. As far as I can tell,
I just made up a child in a story I told you about him. He was born before that.
As far as I can tell, you know, it's just he was, you know, 10 years old by the time I was paying attention. And so it's like, so that's part of evolution. And it's like, well, I don't object to the universe being really old. That's not really relevant to much. The idea that there can be differentiation within a species, that's contained within the idea of evolution. It's like, yeah, that seems, we got lots of different kinds of dogs out there, all shapes and sizes, big dogs, little dogs, mean dogs, nice dogs, you know. And then also contained within the idea of evolution is this idea that everything is explainable through material causality. And it's like, hold on, I don't like that at all. And so you'll get the fundamentalists who, you know, really understand on an intuitive level that you can't have a functional universe that isn't explainable entirely on material causality. And so they'll freak out and reject all of evolution because that one word contains these 6 different concepts within it. So it makes navigating it
Complicated. That's my life.
Complicated.
No,
Complicated.
impossible. No,
I
it's
have-
an impossible term because it
Oh,
can't mean anything specific.
I thought you were saying impossible in relation to me saying my life was complicated. That's what I used to tell people. Show me impossible, I'll show you how it's done. And I've kind of fallen into that weird place where, on the one hand, I'd get the pat answers on things about genetics, about autism, about deafness, about, pick a topic. It was like let me see how many topics I can, gather up for people to kind of critique. And on the other hand, the exact same kid was the one that I, sit there and tell people. So yeah, like when I was 6 months pregnant, God and I had this talk, and this is what I saw, and this is what I said, and blah blah. I give them the whole, yeah, I can't prove this to you either. Spiel. So it's interesting to me that I love that place in the middle where the questions have to really do a hard job. They have to work hard to kind of look both directions. And I'm going to let you continue to talk about it, but I'll say one last thing. So this week I got to have a conversation with the staff at the group home. I do every week, but I was talking about the lists of words and signs, 200 plus lists and words and signs and things before preschool that I could recognize that my son could use, but didn't. And I was talking, so she asked me, well, you mean, does he spell them? And I'm like, yeah, finger spelling was one option I gave him for communication. If you know how to sign it, sign it. If you can finger spell it, do that. If you can point to, the picture, if you can whatever, do that. Let's just try and communicate. And so she was giving him words she thought were going to be tough to spell, and he was miles ahead of her. And so I'm kind of in this place where I'm like, okay, 30 years of, I have no logical explanation for this, nor do I have any logical evidence for any of this, but it's been a fun ride. And I'm really enjoying having conversations with my child finally. Okay. Back to programming. I'm going to keep listening.
Okay. Thanks for hopping on, Sandy. It's always a trip when you're here. I never quite know where things are going to go, and it's delightful.
That's what my life looks like. Thanks. Later.
Take care.
Yeah, I mean, that's really the problem, right? People get caught up in these scientific explanations and scientific ways of dealing it. Why? It's a total waste of time for most things. It just doesn't matter. And it's good to see Nick here. The interesting thing about random and random chance is the following. Random chance, right, or randomness is one way of saying things we cannot find order in, which is one way of saying miracle. And when you think of it that way, it all makes sense. You can just make sense of everything the science idiots are saying once you realize random means miracle.
And you would especially be able to speak about random intelligently because it's a problem for computers. Because they can. I was so fascinated by this. I watched this video, and maybe I shouldn't be proud about it, but I'll just say it about how they did Legend of Zelda Wind Waker 100% speed runs. And there's this game in the middle of it that has random chance in it. It's just 100%, from our perspective, random. And so what they had to do is they had to come up with a heat map. It was like a battleship thing. Yep. And okay, most speedrunners are going to get here within a 2-minute frame, but they can figure out, okay, if they consistently speed ran it up to this point, well, the way it regenerates random numbers is every frame, it'll just kick out some kind of a number. Right. Just but it procedurally. Yep. And so you could do this heat map because once you started the game, it was kind of set and it allowed them to take the guesswork out of it. But it was oh yeah, a computer really shouldn't be generating random numbers. In fact, if your computer is generating random numbers, that means it's like being bombarded by cosmic radiation or something. Right.
And random generation starts with what's called a seed. And if you know the seed and you know the time, you can calculate, because there's only a handful of algorithms that, quote, generate randomness, but they're algorithms. So it's not random. If you know the pieces, it's not random. So it's actually just hidden order. That's really all it is. And there are some alleged mathematical exceptions, but the math people are tilting the table on that, and I can't do math at all. So I can't tell you whether or not they're legit, because but I can tell you the following observation, right? Which is, every time they've come up with one of these random number generators, somebody finds a way to beat it.
Well, the interesting thing is, it works quite well in a video game world, right? Because if you're just playing the game casually, it's going to be vastly different for different people. And so you go into the same shop and they've got the rupees, and the rupees have a little flash determined by whether or not the random number gets above a certain number when it calls for the number. And so you would have two different people playing the same game and like, look, the numbers are flashing differently. It's obviously not determined. It's random, but it's like you go one level underneath it. The randomness is no longer random.
Right. Well, and that's
but it gives the
real
illusion
lesson.
of it.
But that's the real lesson, right? And they take away the wrong lesson from it. They go, oh, but if I only knew the layer beneath or the layer above, or sometimes both, then the order would appear and the world would be perfectly rational again. That's the fundamentalist problem, is they think that if they just got underneath or on top of this thing, that rationality would appear.
I think that's what the Last Judgment will be. We finally get the God's eye view of everything.
Sure.
So not anything that we're going to have access to, until Jesus shows up again, and who knows when that's going to be. But like that'll be like the revelation of the 30,000 foot view of the entire cosmos.
Right.
But like we have to change in order to be able to see that, and we're never going to get to the bottom of it.
Right. Yeah, and that's usually what people are after. And that's also where they get the idea that more information is better. And it's like, actually, more information is way worse, because you can't deal with the information you have now. You don't need more. More is just going to confuse you more and confuse everybody else. And this is one of the problems. Like, people kind of poo-poo, oh, I get a standard answer from people when they talk about X. What do you expect them to give you? What if they don't have any more to give you? A lot of people just assume, well, they probably know more.
I mean, there is a way where a standard answer can be, I don't want to deal with this right now.
Sure, you can use things any way you want, but assuming that they have more that they can, not that they have more, but they have more that they can give you.
Yeah.
There are so many things I would like to explain to people that I cannot explain them. My YouTube channel, in many ways, is just me, like, finally being able to explain things that are completely obvious and so just basically observable in the world that I've just never thought about how you would explain this to somebody who doesn't understand it. Right. And
maybe it's the explaining it and the understanding that's the problem.
Yeah. Well, but people need to know certain things, right? Especially now, because they're very confused about, especially about implications, right? Like you don't get free speech without a bunch of garbage people saying garbage things. And so if you don't want people saying garbage things, you're going to have to do some censorship. And then they don't understand that free speech means censorship, right? Not the other way around.
It's like, did these guys go to kindergarten?
Everybody's seen, but it's everybody. Not only that, and here's the thing that
it's everybody on Twitter, because I can go out and talk to farmers and they just get these things.
It's everybody in certain jobs, for sure, right? If you work with nature or within nature, you don't have these problems. But if you don't, right? If you live in a city or you've stayed in the city too long, and here's the fascinating part. Some of the people that taught me some of these contradictions have now adopted the contradictions and don't realize it. And they're the ones that told me not to get into these contradictions because they're contradictions and they're impossible. And they have subsequently themselves lost the ability to do the very thing that they imparted onto me. And that's kind of scary, because basically there are skills of thinking and you can lose those skills. And people are losing those skills at a rapid rate, I would say. And that's part of the problem, is that we haven't accounted for that variable yet. We're thinking of this as generational or whatever. And there's certainly a component of that there. But also there's people who know damn well better, who 15 years ago never would have made that mistake, who are like locked into that mistake. They're just making it all the time. And it's so fascinating. I'm like, I had this conversation with you 20 years ago and you were on the other side. I don't know what to tell you.
Well, it's either their passions or ignorance or malice.
I think they lost the skill. And when you're relying on rationality to save you, because it's effectively what you're saying, I don't need anything else. I just have me and my rationality, and that's going to give me the ability to, quote, critically think, which is a nonsense term. What they really mean is rationally think, right? And that will correct me. That will allow me to self-transcend, or some other nonsense term like that. That can't happen. What's going to happen when you're relying on yourself is you're going to double down and you're going to narrow the field. It's going to be the reciprocal narrowing that John Vervaeke talks about all the way down.
So you talked about professions that are more susceptible to this, we'll say, self-bullshitting. Are we going to take it like journalists, university professors, computer programmers?
Yeah. Anybody who doesn't work with nature. Or
anybody who does it with, priests too.
A lot of priests too.
I guess.
Andrew, no, that isn't what happened. They insist they never held the view. They've rewritten their memory, because you can rewrite your memory. See, this is scary. This is what nobody wants to hear. You rewrite your memory all the time. They don't believe they're wrong in the past. They believe they never held that view. And I'm like, I got it in text, kid. Because I write things down. Sometimes I save text conversations, because I know not to trust my memory, and my memory is excellent. I don't trust my memory. I know better than that trick. So yeah, you have one psychotic break, you won't trust your mind very much anymore. If you recover from it, which hopefully you do. Yeah, you won't trust your mind anymore. You'll know your mind can trick you pretty well. And that's the problem. And the other problem is we keep making excuses for bad behavior. No, they didn't change their minds. They're behaving badly. They really are. I know them. You don't. It's okay. But also, I was there. This isn't the situation that happened.
Yeah.
I would like to think that it's not an innocent thing. And it's not their fault, right? It's possession. Right?
Now,
what happens when you narrow your world? You get possessed.
What about people who exist kind of on the border between, we'll say, nature and artifice? Let's say artisans of some sort, where they have to contend with, we'll say, the bumps and the irregularities and the eccentricities of nature, but they end up turning it into, we'll say, a nice wood paneled room. So let's talk about like carpenters and such.
There's nothing wrong with them.
Yeah. They seem to be pretty well grounded too. So
right. It's the people that do construction for a living, not grounded. They pour concrete and they run cranes and stuff.
So by the time they get to the nature, it's already been shaped.
So they've never been in nature.
Yeah.
Right.
They only get raw materials.
They get raw materials, quote, raw materials, which are all processed. Everything we call a raw materials process. They get that, right? Raw materials for building. There's no such thing as raw materials. The only raw materials for building that exist are clay that can be made into brick and trees. That's it. There's no other raw materials for building. Sorry. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Everything else is, including concrete.
So right. I look at the, at one of our events today, I had the opportunity to sit down and talk to a farmer's wife and the kids. The farmer was off, not farming. He was with one of the other kids. And, I just love talking to it because it's so interesting. There's no bottom to it. I couldn't be a farmer. I might be able to work for a farmer, but I couldn't do it because you have to know so much, and the way you know it is not book learnable for the most part. You know, maybe someday I could aspire to be a gardener, but not right now because I have to go out to Washington D.C. every summer. That's the only time you can grow anything here. Just listening to them, like, oh yeah, you know, we were having all these dust storms, and so we're really glad that the rain was coming. And it's like, man, you know, like 3 years ago, like their area was flooded, and now it's dry, and just the chaos that a farmer has to contend with is just unreal. Yeah, the uncertainty.
Right. Sally Joe was talking about this the other day. You know, the business guys kind of come in, or even the insurance companies, or the banks, or whatever, and they're like, "All right, well, what do you think your crop yield's going to be next year?" And they're like, "What kind of a dumb question is that? You can't even guess that. Like, they don't even try to guess that.
Right?
They don't even try to guess that because they're smart and they know that they can't."
Yeah,
and that's the thing.
The question they could ask is, how many acres do you think you're going to plant next year? That's a question. But yeah, what's your yield's going to be?
That's not even a reasonable question. Depends if the South pasture floods. 2 years ago, the South pasture was flooded. Couldn't plant anything on half my acreage.
Yeah.
Happens all the time.
Yeah. But
they don't even.
Of course, their answer would always be, "Oh, I'm going to plant all of it if I can."
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
And the funny part is, what are you going to plant? Are you going to plant more hay or more alfalfa?
Did they actually ask that?
No. But like you couldn't answer because how much alfalfa you plant is heavily dependent upon a bunch of factors, right? Because alfalfa is a substitute for hay at some point, but it has different qualities in terms of how much you can feed and how, right? So the ratio of alfalfa to hay matters.
I think you might be a little confused because I think alfalfa gets turned into hay.
No, it can. You can use it for feed.
Like just have them go out and graze there?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Oh, sure.
And I think they graze it later.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. That makes sense. That makes sense.
Right. So, but the growing seasons are a little bit different, and
usually when you plant a patch of alfalfa, it's there for like 5 years because it's grass. It just grows back. You don't have to plant it every year like most other crops. And so,
right, and hopefully you're rotating your fields. So, maybe you don't even let it grow. Maybe you trample it. So there's all kinds of things that farming's ridiculously complex.
And that's why you need to come on here, Sally, and straighten this out because, like, I kind of know some things, but there's plenty. Alfalfa can be hay.
It can be hay. Yeah, it can be hayed. Yeah,
but it's not all hay is alfalfa. Okay, there we go. We got some logic here. Sally coming in to bring the logic.
Yeah, but farming's not logical, right? Like, and that's the thing. Like, you could talk to farmers, and the thing is, you can talk to farmers about very deep, philosophical sounding points, and they know as much about that as they do about farming, right? But you talk to a book learning guy about it, and they use dumb terms like evolution to describe a whole bunch of things that aren't scientific, and they don't realize it because they're narrowed in on a particular idea that they're not specifying. And that allows them to equivocate in their heads about these things. But when you talk to, and so they don't know what they don't know, right? They're not wise. When you talk to a farmer, they will tell you what they do not know. They will tell you what they are uncertain of.
I don't know if it's going to rain.
Exactly. I don't know. I don't know what my yield's going to be next year.
Oh, I don't know how to estimate Sally. Look what we did to Sally. She's so disappointed in us. And now her skin's yellow because she's an emoji.
She turned into an emoji?
She turned into an emoji.
Good, well, it lasted. Someone will take care of Wallace for her. Don't worry.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to stress her out. Yeah, no, talking to farmers is fascinating. I think they still run the clubhouse room every weeknight. I think they were running a little like very scientific, which was funny, report on growing techniques. And
Oh, out of all the places where science might be useful, like farming, yeah, like this fertilizer had this kind of growth that, and then you've got all the different lines. That's what they do over at NDSU is they got the ag research there, and
right.
the Honeycrisp apple came from Minnesota State University. So, science sometimes is it's all right. It's all right.
Yeah, for the 4 things it ever did, and everything else it claims credit for, and then they do weird things like they talk about evolution and they point to genetics. It's like, all right, genetics is way older than evolution. I don't know what to tell you. Like the term evolution was around a long time after genetics was well known and understood.
Right. Well, because we've been breeding dogs forever.
And plants and all kinds of things. We've been breeding all kinds of things forever. Plants are probably the first thing.
Animal husbandry.
Animal husbandry is old, right?
Yeah.
I mean, all these things are old. And that's really the problem, is that people will point at genetics and go, see evolution. And I'm like, not even part of evolution.
That's like taking the complete works of Shakespeare, right?
Yeah.
And just saying, look at the letters. He used the letter F. And it's like, right. I don't know. The impressive part of Shakespeare is the stories. And he just kind of used the letters to make them, right? And so these people who are getting all into genetics are like, look at all the, the little Gattaca sequences. And it's like, no, the impressive bits when you get, the really big Basset hound. Like that's the impressive stuff.
Right. That's the problem, is that when we confuse the few tiny, insignificant, in many cases, wins of science. Like I have yet to hear, I'm sure it's out there. Like I'm not making a claim, but I have yet to hear anybody tell me a useful thing from relativity that they can prove is from relativity. Like it's a direct result of Einstein's theory of relativity. And I still argue Einstein's theory of relativity is banal, and all he did was the math. And look, I can't do the math. It's wonderful. But also, the principles he's talking about were well known. All he did was put math to it. Maybe that's useful. It didn't help us with GPS satellites, though. I'm sorry. That did not happen. I don't know what to tell you. We wouldn't have GPS navigation. We actually had the equivalent of GPS navigation. Sorry. Okay, and the number of people that don't know that is stunning.
We wouldn't have it electronically.
We wouldn't have it as precise and accurate. It couldn't be down to 30 feet or 5 feet, depending on who you ask about what the military is capable of. Well, all they do is shave off the end bits on the number and don't allow you to use them. But they're there. You could use them.
Okay.
I don't know that, I don't. The problem is that level of accuracy and precision is not needed for most things. And it's not accurate and precise enough to help you figure out which street to turn onto. So,
well, I mean, lots of people are able to use their GPS function, and maybe what it provides is that portability and ease of use, right? So you don't need the skills that the captain of a seafaring ship in the Bronze Age would need.
You don't need to read a map anymore.
You don't even need to read a map. You just need to know the address of where you're going.
Well, when you use a GPS with an electronic map that updates, you get something out of it. But you don't need Einstein for any of that. None of it. Zero. None of that technology relies on anything in relativity. And all of the technologies that are explained by relativity predate it. So I don't know what did Einstein do exactly?
I mean, the clocks. There would be a minute difference in the clock speed of satellites in geosynchronous orbit versus the speed that clocks run on the surface of the Earth. And so the math used by the algorithms to figure out the GPS satellites would need to be able to account for that, right? because part of it is timing.
Right. But guess what? It just turns out that if you set them, and this is something that they did in the past, if you set up a timer at the same point as another timer and just separate them, the fact that they drift is, going to be somewhat of a problem, but it's not going to create enough of a problem that you can't get close enough. See,
Okay.
and that's where the problem is. You don't need the numbers to match. You just need the relative number, which means you can start 2 clocks out at different times and move them. And as long as you know what the different times were, you don't need the sophisticated math for how far apart they are and what the drag of gravity is based on. You don't need any of that because it's a relativistic calculation. I mean, it's a relative calculation anyway. And the theory of relativity doesn't help you with a relative calculation. It just says effectively all calculations are relative to the point of reference. It's really all it says at the end of the day. Yeah, there's a lot of fancy math behind what you can do with that in theory. That's wonderful. But again, and I'm sure there's something out there. I'm not claiming there's nothing out there. I'm saying I have yet to find anybody that can explain to me one thing that actually relies on that math that isn't predated by the math of the theory. Because it just like it's
relies
like the ancient
on
Romans.
the math. That's an important phrase you just used right there. Relies on the math. I can see that. Yeah.
Right, because the math is a map. So you're confusing the map for the territory, right? So you go back and you look at ancient swords and you find nanotubes. You go back and you find nanoparticles of gold or silver or both in ancient Roman glassware. You didn't need the math or the knowledge or any of the science, which we didn't have back then, to do any of those things. And so the science is nice, but it's not required for any of it.
Yeah, no, engineers. We had engineers long before we had scientists.
I saw a video recently, and I didn't watch it, but the guy's claim was, and I think he's right about this, but I didn't watch the video, so I didn't understand the claim fully. But he said, modern concrete is garbage. It's all going to be gone in 50 years from whenever it's poured. But the ancients knew how to fix this, and we could just follow their lead, and they already had all this figured out. This is why their buildings made of concrete are still up. And we'd use less concrete. It would be less destructive to the environment, blah, 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 blah. Use less energy. His whole argument was, the energy production for concrete is
Now, there has to be trade-offs. There has to be trade-offs. Would it just be more labor intensive?
I don't think so. I think
does it cure as quickly? I'm sure there's got to be a trade-off in there somewhere.
Oh yeah, there is. It's just in favor of the ancient stuff to the modern. The modern stuff is much more complicated for no reason. Like they didn't have rebar. They didn't use rebar in ancient concrete. So
yeah, they also designed the bridges differently. They're all arch bridges. I've never seen pillar and because that's what the rebar really comes in handy is when you've got a shearing force on whatever it is that you're building. The rebar makes that way stronger because you just pick up a slab of concrete without rebar in it, it'll break like that.
It crumbles pretty easily. Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't do force in certain directions very well.
Yeah. Compression, it's brilliant at compression, right? You could put tons of weight on it and it won't budge, but you pull it apart. We are talking about the Roman Empire, Don.
That's all guys think about, Don. Everything we say is actually coded about the Roman Empire. Everything. Every word. If we say hello, there's a Roman greeting in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Favorite meme of all time. That one.
Handshakes, Roman Empire.
Everything's Rome.
Talk about the weather, Roman Empire. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's fascinating to me that everyone's like, science, science, science. And I'm like, all right, name me a science thing. And then no one can. I'm like.
Pasteurization. They did experiments for that one.
They did after they found it. They did experiments like the light bulb. They did experiments after they found the phenomena. If you talk to sciencey people, they're like, science discovered X. And I'm like, no, science explained X after it was discovered, and therefore we could have more X reliably, and then eventually better X. Okay, but science didn't discover anything. That's not science's job. And the things science did, quote, discover were discovered because of an experiment that went wrong.
Okay, yeah, discovering. Yeah. Sometimes science can actually be really useful at disproving, though.
Well, that's its whole shtick. See, this is the thing that bothers me. Everyone's like, well, it's symmetrical, this and symmetrical. Science relies on the asymmetry of right versus wrong. And the fact that it's not equally easy to prove something right or wrong. We know this mathematically. It's way easier to prove something wrong than it is to validate something or prove it correct. And that's what science takes advantage of. The scientific method takes advantage of that fact. It's way easier to figure out if something's wrong. That's why a thesis is something that hasn't, a hypothesis is something that hasn't been disproven, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it could get disproven, right? But it hasn't been yet, right? And then once it gets disproven, it's gone. It's just a bad idea that failed.
Yeah, no, because the pasteurization was trying to figure out, okay, where do the microbes in milk, let's say, come from? And or some of the experiments that they did to figure that out. It was settling a question, but people had probably figured out that, cooking things makes them a lot safer to eat.
Yeah, they already knew that.
We've known that for centuries. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. And we've got some consensus here. Andrew can agree with cheese.
As long as Andrew agrees with cheese, then there will be no war between us. For now.
For now.
Cheese is important. It tastes delicious. I had some today. It was yummy.
Like really good cheese, like not just a block of Kraft whatever.
No. I had the leftover baked macaroni and cheese, and it was.
Oh yeah, when you bake it.
Oh yeah, 2 different types of cheeses because there's different cheese on top.
And here's the secret. Here's the decadent secret: is you use heavy whipping cream instead of milk.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Oh, it's deadly.
Cream instead of milk. Always cream instead of milk. Yep.
I can make a what I really put my mind to it. I can make a really outrageous pan of baked mac and cheese. I haven't had to put my mind to it for about a year now, but
yeah. Why didn't you make me some then? Now I'm a little put out.
When I was down there?
Yeah, you were here. Like, what the hell? All I got was the refried ramen noodles. Come on.
The refried.
Which is great, by the way. But
Barbarian cacio e pepe.
I love that. Yeah, I've made it a couple times since then. It's quite good.
Yeah. Okay. Next time we're in a place with a kitchen, I'll make you decadent mac and cheese.
That sounds good. I'm going to hold you to that, Father, for sure. I can't wait.
It'll knock us out, though. That'll be the end of whatever we're doing that day.
That's fine. That's fine. That's why you have it for dinner and not lunch.
Yeah. That was a mistake we made. I made it for lunch with somebody else. One of my other friends. He was expecting me to feed him, though. See, that's the thing. So you didn't put any expectations of me feeding you while I was a guest.
No,
at your house.
None, 0, zip.
Yeah.
It was a fight. It was a fight for you to get to cook your thing, in fact. Yeah. I usually don't let my guests cook. That would be inhospitable. Hospitality was at the topic at the Symbolic World Summit. I very much appreciated that talk. Because that's one of those things that's like politeness, right? That's another door back into politeness, which is how we cooperate with people we don't know.
Social lubricant, absolutely.
Well, and dress is another thing that we were talking about earlier, right? Like, nice dress is important because it tells you something about how to cooperate with somebody you haven't yet met.
Yeah, no, because so we're not even talking about wearing a tuxedo or whatever. We're just talking about being decently put together. Means it's a signal to people that, hey, I had time to shave this morning, brush my teeth. I regularly groom my beard. My clothes are clean and are basically in order. Maybe a little bit, but like nobody worries about that. I'm sane and competent.
Well, and I'm not in need of your help in that way.
Yeah. It also
know
means
who to
that
help.
there's a standard outside of myself that I'm holding myself to, which is actually a really useful thing to know about somebody, because if you've got somebody who's just this, thrift shop hipster, everything coming from every which way, they're just kind of a chaotic looking person. What are you going to get out of them?
Yeah.
When you ask them, how are you doing, right? Are they going to like try and recruit you into the Communist Party? Are they going to just stare at you?
Well, and also who to ask for help and who could help you, right? Like there's lots of ways in which losing proper dress and proper dress doesn't, like you said, doesn't have to be nice dress, right? But we have to have that contrast and that differentiation along the lines that are useful to us to know about. Then we know how to treat people and greet them, and like it's so helpful, right? It's just so helpful.
All right, Dawn, we'll get to hear from the ladies here. Would be happy if men just stopped wearing shirts that are too small for them. So I don't know. Are we talking like t-shirts? And my shirts fit. That's all I'm saying. And that's why sweatpants at Walmart are terrifying. I have gone straight to the gym from the gym to Walmart before, so I've been one of those sweatpant people at Walmart on occasion. But it was Walmart. It seemed fitting.
But yeah, see, I disagree with Sally. It's like, what? That's where you do that. That's where you go to Walmart.
All those buttons threatening to pop off.
No, definitely never made that mistake.
Walmart is not for sleeping or working out, so what are you doing? Okay.
Are you sure? Walmart's pretty big around here. Kind of is a workout. Just saying.
Hot pants? Am I supposed to know what hot pants are?
No, you should not.
Okay.
Definitely not.
So if somebody confesses wearing hot pants, it's just a sin against modesty?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, and humanity as such, I would say.
Well, I need to be a little more specific about that, because all sins are technically sins against humanity and God. You always get them both.
What? Both?
Oh, yeah, man. That's the funny thing, right? Is that all sins are ultimately sins against God.
What a busybody he is. Jeez.
Well, when you create your own universe, Mark, you can be as involved or as uninvolved in it as you want, okay?
No. See, that's the thing that ruined the world. Now everybody's a freaking video game designer. That's why. Good job, Father Eric.
Okay, but that's not really a universe you can live in.
Oh, really?
I know people try. I am aware that people try. Perhaps in my past, I myself have tried. But
yes. Sally's off crying somewhere. Oh, goodness. Yeah. No, people are trying. And they're trying to make bigger universes, too.
I suppose. Sally, I need you to get the Shadow Matriarchy on enforcing this. Leggings for underdresses.
Yeah.
It's really, man, like this whole modesty thing. Like I can enforce modesty with men. I can tell guys they need to simmer down. They need to stop being so braggadocious. They need to stop flexing in front of the ladies. They need to stop spending so much money trying to make themselves look hip. But the women gotta take care of the women's side of the modesty. I can only take care of the men's side of the modesty.
Well, they've done away with the ability to even chastise on that basis. That's another thing that's popped up on Twitter quite a lot lately, is the porn problem. And Matt Walsh has been porn, and I keep telling him, like, no, dude, that's the symptom. That is not the problem. Even if you could remove it, which, by the way, it's just physically impossible. Don't even think about it. It wouldn't solve the problem. The problem would move. And and they're pointing at all these numbers like, you guys do not understand it's the modesty problem. That's what causes the porn symptom.
Yeah. No, that might be true, but when you've got children, it tends to, you want to do something about, all the porn because it tends to seep in.
No, the availability of it is a problem.
Okay.
The thing is, how do you get rid of availability? You make it expensive enough that it's no longer available.
Yeah. Dang, Sally. You just keep on spitting fire like that. If they can tell you to wear masks.
Sally's dropping bombs. Yeah, I guess if you could tell people to wear masks, you should be able to tell them
Or leggings or underwear.
that leggings or underwear. Yeah, it seems fair. And yet they won't, because one's an issue of modesty and the other isn't. And if
it saves one life, Mark. If it saves one soul.
One soul. Well,
I can't see the difference between those statements.
The modesty saves way more souls than one.
Yeah. Although we have to be very precise about this, because if modesty is a virtue, then the first person it perfects is the person that is practicing the virtue. That has to be first. Gives glory to God, perfects the person who's practicing it. All of the social stuff is great. It's secondary. Because people just, yeah, I have a video on this. It's called Modesty and Temperance. I don't think it's any good, but I'm really intent on the topic.
That's a good topic.
Yeah, because the way you hear people talking about modesty, right? And I'm talking Christians, right? I'm not talking about like some yahoos. I'm like talking about people trying to do their best, is they will locate it. First off, they only ever talk about it in terms of women, and it's a human virtue for human beings. The way it's instantiated is kind of different in between men and women, and we'll get to that later. But it's a human virtue for human beings. It's also, I think, somewhat more obvious the way that it goes wrong in women than in men, but that could be put aside, and that might be a part of the trouble. So you'll only ever hear him talk about it with women, and then you'll always hear it as like either a function of prudence or of justice, right? They're annexing it to one of those things. So prudence, right? Oh, you got to be careful what you're doing to the men around you. You wouldn't want to excite all these passions inside of them. It's like, is that the number one reason? Or it'll be justice. It's like, you got to give them a chance, right? Because the boys, they really can't control themselves. And so you got to control yourself so the boys can control themselves. But then when you go and actually study Thomas Aquinas, this evening's program brought to you by Thomas Aquinas, he places it under temperance. And his definition of modesty is that virtue by which you control your passions in matters where it's fairly easy to control them. So it's actually like a blanket virtue for a whole lot of things. So you've got special virtues under modesty for like chastity and, food and drink, those like primordial appetites inside of us that need to be regulated by a special virtue. But for modesty, it covers a whole lot of things, right? And so it's when you put it underneath temperance, right, that you've got appetites that you need to control. It shifts the entire conversation from being other people and how they relate to you and how you relate to other people, which is something that you're actually in control of. Because no matter how modestly a woman might dress, a man can still lust after her, right?
Yep.
You can. I don't know. I know this isn't in the Protestant Bibles, but the wicked elders of Israel were still lusting after Susanna, even though she was well known to be a virtuous woman and was behaving modestly in the house of her husband there. So, yeah. So modesty is outward things that are easy to regulate. That's what the virtue of modesty covers. And so it's like if somebody's bragging, what do? We tell them to be modest,
Right.
right? We tell them to be modest when they're bragging, because it's like, you really could just not brag right now. And you could try and not gain pleasure by overextending yourself socially, basically, because it all comes back to temperance, right? Modesty would also say that sometimes you should dress up nice. So you're going to a wedding, right? This is an important occasion. You're going to a wedding at a church. You're going to a wedding at a church where I am the main celebrant. Yeah, all right. You dress up for that because this is important, right? If you dress down on that, if you're like, I'm going to wear a ratty t-shirt and oily jeans that I use to work on a car, you're actually drawing attention to yourself by your incongruity with the rest of the thing. The only reason you would do that is if you're just going to try and be like, hey, everybody check me out, or if you're utterly clueless, because ignorance is also a cause of sin. See the beginning of the live stream.
Right.
So sometimes modesty would actually dictate that you dress very nicely. Right? So it's so much bigger than just leggings, although leggings are a part of it. And we won't deny that. And then, because some of the most, we'll say, pleasurable passions you can have is getting attention from the opposite sex, the way that you comport yourself around the opposite sex makes a big difference in the virtue of modesty for both men and women, right?
Right.
You don't want to be the sort of person that is just constantly seeking after that attention to get that hit of the pleasurable passions. So you regulate yourself so that you're not constantly seeking after that. I think that explanation that I did was even better than the PowerPoint I made for that other video I made. So I'll just go delete it.
Just remake it. Remake it.
I guess it's so much easier to just explain it to you rather than talking to a camera.
Probably. Well, also when you explain things to me, you have to be a little more careful with your language than you do with a camera. It's not gonna, no fear that the camera's gonna correct you, but if you stray one word out of line, I'm gonna speak up. That's why you need other people. Like, other people make you better automatically.
All right. See, this is what I'm fighting against, Sandy. Heard a youth group talk on that where the speaker told the girl in front of the boys that the boys can't help themselves, so it's the girl's fault that they don't. It's exactly what I'm trying to fight, because the boys have a responsibility for their own chastity and their own custody of their eyes.
Right.
No matter what the crazy women are doing.
Right. Well, but it is a responsibility on both sides. Like, people tend to put
everybody has the responsibility
in one place. Right. And you can't do that. Right. You can't ultimately do that.
See, Andrew gets it. He's been striving after holiness for a while.
Yeah. You can just not look at things.
Well, look, Mark, this isn't complicated. The first look's fine. The second look's where you get in trouble. You can't get away from the first look. There's things moving. You have to look at them.
That's what I mean.
The second look's going to get you in trouble, man.
Right. Also, passions. So.
Yeah. The passions, right? Because those can lead you into sin, as we talked about at the beginning of the live stream.
We did. It was an excellent beginning, by the way.
I try.
I liked it. It wasn't either of the topics I thought you'd touch on, but that's great. I like being surprised.
Well, this is my live stream, not yours.
I know. It's just, sometimes you float things and sound like they might be live stream topics. So I'm like, I wonder if that's it. And then I'm like, oh, I'm totally surprised.
Well, if I'm not confident, that's why I'm floating them to you.
True.
Hey, Andrew, how do you go to an engineering school? How do you tell which ones are the extroverts or the ones that look at your shoes while they're talking to you and not their own?
Ouch. Shots fired. Shots totally fired. Oh yeah, I gotta send you this video, Father Eric. It's called "Find a Good Priest." It's really good.
Yeah.
But basically the theme of it was sacrifice and pray for your priest.
Oh yeah. Make them good. That'd be nice. You all have to. I should ask for prayers more. I don't do that
Yeah,
enough.
you
Cardinal
should.
Burke does it all the time, and yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna put
Even
that on the
Pope
list.
Francis said that. He said that to our group after we took a photo with him. He said, "Pray for me." I was like, "Oh, I will. I will, Your Holiness."
So this guy was saying, he was saying basically that they took out praying for the Pope at some point and replaced like daily celebration. And I was like, what? Dude, you're not supposed to pray for the Pope anymore? Like, what is this?
I'd be interested to hear the context he's talking about that. It's still in every single mass that we pray for the Pope by name.
Well, I think he was talking about the Vatican in particular.
Oh, okay. All righty.
The crazy Italians.
Crazy Italians, crazy Germans,
Boy,
crazy Swiss.
He brought up some great stuff. He brought up the whole like, yeah, back in the day, no one knew who the Pope was.
Well, it's like the Pope could have been dead for 6 months and just word hadn't gotten around yet. So it's yeah, I've got a desire for the next Pope. I've got several, got lots of them. I'll be honest. I think about it a lot, maybe more than is helpful. I'd like the next Pope to be a canon lawyer.
No, the next Pope has to be you.
Okay, that would still work because I'm in school for canon law. So,
yes,
I'd like the next Pope to never speak publicly unless it's through a document that's been vetted by the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith. Father Ripperger. Okay. Yeah. He's intense. I don't know.
He's great.
He's great, right? I've got his book. on.
Oh, he's got a book. No, I like this guy. I'm like all in on Ripperger. I'm like, I don't know who this guy is, but I'm 100% in.
Yeah, he's real solid. He's written a very useful manual of minor exorcism prayers that any priest can do. Oh, so like somebody who's made a deal with the devil in a written letter, that's got a prayer for it. Somebody who's suffering from a love potion, I've got that, right? Somebody who's ingested a cursed item, it's in the book. It's all in the book. I didn't know this stuff could happen. I haven't dealt with it yet, but like if it comes up, I can cure you or I can intercede with God and exercise a love potion from you. Yeah. Who knew? I use like the same 4 prayers, whenever I'm doing these minor exorcisms. But
no, that's good to know.
Yeah.
We're gonna lose Nick. Oh well.
How sad.
Yeah, the Catholic version of there's an app for that.
We've got books for like stinking everything. We've got a little library out there of like books that I might need for the bishop. We've got like order for the dedication of a church and altar, order for the blessing of holy oils, confirmations, funerals, you name it, we've got it. Exorcist Pope. We finally can fix Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin, am I going to have to bless every node in the network to get the demons out of it?
Right. You would, yes. It would be something like that.
That's it's a little too much. I think J.K. Rowling actually had the right idea about love potions, is that they don't actually cause you to fall in love. They just make you obsessed with somebody.
Yeah. Probably.
And, I'm not going to say she's like brilliant or the best author ever because that was Dante. But she had some good points and we can appreciate that.
She did have some good points. Yes. That is true. I wonder what happened to Peterson, wondering about where she got that snitch symbol from. Because that was a good question. Like, how the hell did she come up with this? It's a good question. How did she come up with that?
Some people just have potent imaginations.
That's not where I'd put it, but okay.
Yeah, they're sticky, when some spirit comes flying by, gets stuck right in the imagination.
That that's closer to where I'm at with it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's crazy. So I was talking with the priest today. He was the pastor of the place that me and the bishop were visiting, and he was talking about how so there was this auxiliary bishop in the Twin Cities, and you know him by reputation. He's a bishop in your area, so you know his name, you know a little bit about him, but you don't really know him. And the one night, this priest went to sleep, and he had a dream that he was on a bus full of priests, right? And there was a phone in front of him, and the phone rings. He picks up the phone and it says, "Hey, this is Bishop so and so." I was like, "Oh, hi, nice to talk to you, Bishop. How are you doing?" "I'm doing just fine. Hey, listen, I need you to pray for me." And he's like, "Okay, sure, yeah, I'll pray for you, right?" And then he just hangs the phone up and wakes up, and he's just like, "Oh gosh, that was a weird dream. I don't even know this guy, right? Like maybe I've shaken his hand once, you know." And he woke up, and that very day it was announced that he was being transferred from being an auxiliary bishop of the Twin Cities to his own diocese, which is a big change. It's just like, dude. When Thomas Aquinas says the dreams before dawn are most likely to be a natural mode of prophecy, he wasn't wrong.
Was Tommy wrong about anything?
Yes, the Immaculate Conception.
Oh,
and we
really?
just had to take that lump. Yeah. But he was more correct in being wrong about that than Duns Scotus was in being correct about it.
Yeah, Duns Scotus is
had some problems. Univocal concept of being would not recommend.
Bad
Thomistic analogy would recommend. Yeah.
He's one of the four horsemen of the nominalism there, right? So
that's why I said, I think I said this on your stream. Modernity began with the death of Thomas Aquinas. If we're going to use that category at all, that's where we need to date it. 1274.
1274, huh? Maybe. I don't know.
You look at these people who start talking about the Renaissance, they always date it at the end of the 13th century, beginning of the 14th. This.
Something happened.
Thomas Aquinas wrote the Summa, right? Summa Theologia. He never finished it, but he finished most of it, right? Just excellent, excellent work. It's just systematic. It's profound. It's as concise as he could make it. And then only Dominicans read it for 500 years. Right? It's just it's like they've been handed solid gold and they didn't understand what it was. And they just let it go because they're like, well, we have Hugh of St. Victor. We have, and if the Franciscans had stuck with Bonaventure, that would have been fine. But then they went to Duns Scotus and then they went to William of Ockham. It's like, for Pete's sake. It's just mind-boggling to me. And it wasn't until in the late 19th century that Leo XIII's like, hey, guess what? Thomas Aquinas, he's the guy. Everybody's like, holy mackerel, he's right. He was right about everything, The Molinism, too. Molinism, the things the Jesuits came up with, it was just awful.
Jesuits awful confirmed.
Well, Jesuits in the universities. See, when they go out and get martyred by brutal Native American tribes, top-notch Jesuits right there.
The ones out in the field? Yeah, field
workers out in the field usually a lot better. The ones leading retreats usually a lot better. In the university, it gets kind of dicey.
University removes you from nature.
Yeah.
I said that earlier.
It comes up every year in the readings of St. Francis Xavier, a Jesuit, where he's writing a letter he's in India, right, in the 16th century. Not easy to get to India, not easy to get a letter home. And he says, I wish I could just go to the university and parish to these lazy priests and drag them here and have them help me baptize people, because there are millions of souls who would love to become Christians if only anybody would catechize them.
Wow.
So he was St. Francis Xavier. He was all right. A real son of St. Ignatius.
Interesting.
So yeah, they knew that about the universities back then. It's not a unique insight to Mark in 2024.
No, I don't have unique insights. I just look around and go, you guys seeing this? And then some people do, and most people don't. And I'm just like, yeah, but it's right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was Rippinger was saying that too in that talk. He's like, you think church is bad now? Let me tell you about 1930s. Like, what?
Yeah.
He's got to get together with Monsignor Shea there, my other ace.
Your other ace in the hole. Priests
awesome.
You could actually respect.
I like those guys. They're good people. You can tell right away. They're such straight shooters too. Just bang, right on. No, they're pulling no punches. Yeah. Gives me hope.
Yeah. I mean, like I said this to you once. It's like, Catholic Church is just going to keep on doing what it's always doing. And you were like, no, you can't do that. I'm like, yes, we can, because we're just going to wait for God to raise up saints, and then we're going to follow after them. And then you were like, okay, that would work.
It's taking too long. That's all. Just taking way too long. That's a problem. It's gotta right the ship before that, man. It's that's what Rippinger said in that talk too. He was like, yeah, like the church just keeps going in spite of all its mistakes. Keeps going up and down, but keeps trucking.
How did you run across him?
I am trying to remember for the life of me. It's probably been 2-3 weeks since someone sent me that to watch, and it's been sitting there in the browser tab, not getting watched for various good reasons. And today I watched it. Today I banged out videos all day. But yeah, I get backed up on these things.
Bet you it was Casey. Casey seems like a Rippinger kind of guy.
Probably.
Or Adam. Actually, I take that back. Adam's definitely a Rippinger guy.
Oh yeah, Adam probably loved Rippinger. Yeah, we'll have to ask him.
He is a strong cup of tea, though. Like sometimes.
Oh yeah, guys.
Which is why you and him would get along just fine. Although he'd be raising his eyebrow at what you do on Sunday mornings, sleeping in. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah. Yeah. No, it was an interesting listen, and he definitely just does not care. I'm just gonna tell you how it is.
He's from Nebraska, man. Bishop Flavin and Bishop Bruskowitz in the Diocese of Lincoln. Neither of them cared, right? So there was all this, this debate, like, oh, hey, can Catholics be Freemasons? And Bishop Bruskowitz was like, if any of you are Freemasons, I'm going to excommunicate you.
Yeah, there you go.
And out of all the things in the 1980s, the Vatican would back them up on that because they got a different history with the Freemasons over in Italy.
I saw a show not too long ago on the Freemasons where they went through the whole Scottish Rite and the whole thing, and I'm like, what sorcery is this? It's
bad. And that's another delightful thing that Father Rippinger has is the renunciation prayers of ancestral ties to Freemasonry. And I sat through that, right? So it's an interesting thing. So I was doing deliverance and healing prayers with somebody, and they thought that they had some Freemasonry in their background. And I'm like, Father so-and-so, what do I do with this? And you're like, have them do the renunciation of Freemasonry prayers and make sure they do the long version. I was like, oh, okay. So they're sitting there and they go from the top of the orders all the way down to the bottom and renounce each level of Freemasonry. And like they make these vows, like if I ever betray this, I'll be drawn and quartered and have my, flesh fed to the dogs or something like that. And they have to like sit there and renounce every single one of those, vows that their ancestors made.
Mm.
So it's just like, man, this is nasty, like I made a promise to the bishop, right? Do you promise respect and obedience to me and my successors? Yes, and that was it, right? They just let my word be a part of it. It wasn't, do you promise success to me and my successors? Otherwise I'm going to, cut your head off. Right? It's like,
otherwise you will be burned alive.
Yeah. Now, Sandy, talking about, so Freemasonry was able to thrive in the United States because it wasn't opposed by the Catholic Church. And it got along well with the Catholic Church because, or the government here, because, it was officially a disenfranchised thing. And as far as I can tell, and I'm not an expert on these things, the Freemasons are they have a deistic theology. So,
yep.
Kind of the God who winds up the clockwork of the universe and ticks it down. Because of the secret oaths that Freemasons would take, which the church doesn't like people making secret oaths. If you're going to make an oath, you make that out in public because people need to know that you've made these oaths. That's why we have canonical form for marriages. That's why the bishop comes and receives oaths, vows of people receiving it. That's why the church invented notaries. I don't know, or maybe we picked that up from the Roman legal system. Either way, we saw a good thing and held on to it, right? So the church does not like these secret oaths, does not like the deism that would come in with that. And so the church in Italy and the Freemasons in Italy just fighting constantly. Really, really bad blood there. Whereas, and there have been plenty who have said that, there were Freemasonic conspiracies behind the French Revolution and World War I. I haven't gone through the history on that. So you make your own judgments on those things. It's possible because there were a lot of powerful men, but sometimes conspiracies are more subtle than that. So basically, Catholic Church and Freemasons don't get along. Don't get along. But it's different in the United States because it's like the Catholics came here as a minority, and the Freemasons never really looked at us as that big of a threat. We didn't have the Pope. We didn't have a Catholic monarch. They were kind of running the show. So, we'll let them build churches.
Yeah, definitely in Italy, more of a problem.
Yeah, because they would have been directly opposed to the imperial papacy, for the lack of a better term.
Right. Well, and they were making those secret oaths, and yeah, they have a lot of problems with the fundamental Catholic doctrines, especially at the higher levels when you get up in the order.
Mm-hmm. And frankly, those secret oaths, perfect place for demons to come in.
Demons love secrets.
Yeah. Oh, you just invented one of St. Ignatius's rules for discernment of spirits, Mark. You did that thing again.
Sorry.
Ticks me off because the enemy of souls is like a unscrupulous lover who wishes to conceal the relationship with the soul from the concerned father. That's rule 11 or 12, St. Ignatius's rule for discernment of spirits. So if there's something that's like hiding you to keep this a secret from everybody, guess what? That's not from the Lord. That's from the evil one. Doesn't mean you blast it out to everybody. Maybe you only tell me in confession. That's enough. Yeah.
Lots of wins from the secular people who don't understand language on confession being useful.
Mm-hmm.
This past week it came up a bunch of places, and I'm like, yeah, and that's why private confession is a thing. And they're like, wait, what?
That's why the seal of confession has to be absolutely inviolable.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, you just agreed with the religion that you hate. Good job. And they don't know it because they're dumb. So that just makes it all the sweeter.
I really think you should be rejoicing when people are wise rather than dumb, Mark. I think that's a misalignment of things.
I rejoice every time people are wise.
Good.
It's been a
Glad to hear it.
rejoiceless free week, though, I gotta say. We're getting less wise by the minute, I think, unfortunately.
Well, that's what a disintegrating world is like.
And that is the world we are in. And that is very dismaying. Very, very dismaying.
Yes, indeed. Secular world subconsciously tried to reinvent confession, but botched it and got psychotherapy instead.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. I don't know if they botched it. They think it's a great victory.
Yeah. I don't know. The psychotherapy tends to come with a lot of drugs. So with me, it's drug free. It's drug free. Just get the Eucharist. That's all.
Drug-free redemption?
Drug-free redemption. It's possible.
Dude.
You don't just the Eucharist. And you don't, because of the doctrine of concomitance, you don't even have to receive the wine. All right. Sandy asks, what did you say about the seal of confession? The seal of confession is absolutely inviolable. What that means is as a confessor, I am not permitted to reveal information such that people would be able to connect sin with sinner. Now, around that core, as a practice, and I think it's a good practice, I put extra layers of protection so I never go anywhere near that. So I won't talk about, I heard so-and-so's confession. When I'm on my way into the confessional, I keep my eyes down so I don't see the people who are standing in line there in case they want to go behind the screen. So you just put extra layers and just don't say anything. No good reason to talk about what was going on in confession. I'll talk about what happens inside myself, right? So when I get that, bless me, Father, for I've sinned. It's been 10 years since my last confession. Inside, I'm like, yes, we got him. Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
That's funny. A little celebration.
Yeah, right. I'm like, and these people they feel about that big. And I'm just like, dude, you're here. Nice. Let's get that sin taken care of. It's like a pressure washing video, you're just happy to see the grime get off, You don't care what they did.
I guess. No, that's a good attitude to have about it, I suppose.
Yeah. That, and if I did break the seal of confession, automatic excommunication.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Oh, they don't mess around with it either. Yeah.
Wow. That's great. That's amazing. That's a good thing. I wish they did that with a bunch of other things too.
Yeah. Church discipline. It's always been a crapshoot, frankly, and learning about canon law has only showed me just how much of a crapshoot it's been. So when you've got a place where things are kind of working, that's cause for rejoicing.
I suppose.
You got to do the dance. See, Sandy's pointing at something for you. When somebody shows wisdom once in 10 years, you got to do a little dance.
I will when it happens. Don't hold your breath. It's getting worse. People are getting dumber and dumber and worse and worse.
No, not dumber, more foolish.
No, I think they're getting dumber. I think they're losing the skill of intelligence and rationality and logic in the sea of information. I think there's a trade-off there. I think that's what's going on to some extent.
Well, you and I have made quite the contribution to the sea of information this evening. Blasting it out for free on YouTube.
Yes, very kind of us.
Yeah. Father, I saw your comment to Paul about us being in a situation where the clergy are often more conservative than the laity and the young are more conservative than the old. Can you elaborate on that? I mean, so I'm only looking at the United States of America on that, where that younger clergy are more traditional than the older clergy, and as a general, the clergy more than the laity. And all I can say about that is that comes from the Reformation of the seminaries in the 90s and the 2000s in the United States, which has produced an environment where guys who are serious about their faith are not persecuted, but are rather encouraged to be serious about the traditional forms of traditional Catholicism. And if you want to hear more about that, I have a live stream whose first words are Untold Catholic Story. Untold Catholic Story. Mark was there. He heard it. He thought it was mildly interesting, I'm sure. And I go into a little more detail about how all that happened. For those of you who are regular listeners, you do not need to know the detail that it is now 9:30 where I'm at. And that is a time when rational creatures begin to go to bed because it's dark outside. And so that means it's nighttime. And so I just want to say good night and God bless you all.